Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Rachel Zerin here with a thought for this New Year's Shabbat. I always find it particularly poignant when Parashat Vayechi falls so close to the secular New Year, as it does this year. Vayechi, and this transition that we experience this Shabbat from the book of Genesis to the book of Exodus, are all about endings and beginnings, about reflection and looking back on a life or a period in our lives. Perhaps this parasha holds within it lessons for our own reflection and how we can look back on the year that has passed. Take, for example, Joseph and his brothers. Following the death of Jacob and his burial in the land of Israel, Joseph and his brothers return to Egypt. Joseph's brothers assume that for Joseph, the defining moment in his life must have been the time when they considered leaving him in a pit for dead and instead sold him into slavery. But when they approach Joseph, they find that Joseph himself does not consider that moment of betrayal to be the defining moment in his life. But rather, for him, the most significant feature of his life is the fact that he was able to save an entire region from famine. He looks back on his life, a life that was fraught, and sees not betrayal, but blessing. Not the bad, but the good. If we are to learn from this, then what does this mean for us? Are we to focus only on the good and not on the bad, like Joseph? Or is life perhaps more complicated than that? For an answer, perhaps we can look elsewhere in our parasha. Looking earlier in our parasha, to before Jacob passes away, we find that when Jacob is nearing the end of his life, he calls Joseph to him. And before blessing Joseph's children, Ephraim and Manasseh, Jacob reflects on his life as well. And he calls to mind and shares with Joseph two significant features of his own life. When Jacob reflects on his life, he thinks of the following two moments. First of all, he thinks of the promise from God that he will become a kahal amim, a community of nations, and they will inherit the land of Israel. And second, he recalls the death of Rachel, his beloved wife, who died tragically and too young, and died during a journey so that she could not be buried in the same cave where the rest of the family was buried. Jacob, in looking back on his life, focuses on the good and the bad, the blessing and the burden. Perhaps that is where we should find our lesson. When we look back on 2023, it is so easy to think of October 7th as the defining feature of the year. And in so many ways, it was. But both locally here in our own Bethel community and in our global community, there was good and bad, blessing and burden that defined 2023. As a Bethel family, we welcomed a new director of education and family engagement. We welcomed new babies into our community. We celebrated B'nai Mitzvah and weddings, just as we also said goodbye to beloved congregants and shared each other's sorrows. And as a people, we mourned so deeply. We have experienced anti-Semitism at a level that many of us have never experienced before. And at the same time, we have seen people coming together in moving and meaningful ways that we also have never seen before. Hundreds of thousands coming together to march on Washington, volunteers coming out in the land of Israel and here at home in ways that we have never seen before, people coming together to help and to support each other in ways that are beautiful. As we look back on 2023, my hope is that we will see the good and the bad, the blessing and the burden, and that we can move forward with both into the new year. Shabbat Shalom.